Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. It's great to have Olga Lautman on. She is my favorite Kremlinologist, and she just published a fantastic new Substack piece titled From Kremlin to MAGA, Russia's Decade-Long Influence in America. I hate to point out the obvious, Olga, but it looks like Vladimir Putin's investment paid off. How do you read things?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, short term it did pay off. Long term, we will have to wait to see how things play out over the next decade. But the thing is that Russia, I mean, going back to the Soviet Union, they're experts at propaganda. They're experts at disinformation. This is their playbook. And over the past few decades, after Putin came to power, I mean, frankly, they never stopped. But after Putin came to power and, consolidated and put his own loyalists into all the key institutions, state companies, then they started working outward. First, they started working and testing these, tactics, refreshing them basically, and perfecting them in Ukraine, and in Georgia, and in, all the former, as I call it, countries that were held hostage by the Soviet Union. I mean, even during the 2004 Ukrainian election, Russia went as far as poisoning the presidential candidate, Yushchenko, which now, thanks to U.S. intelligence 2 decades later, they seem to confirm that it was indeed a poisoning by Russia. And then once they perfected these tactics in, Ukraine, Georgia, Estonia, and other countries, neighboring them or ones that they had control over, they started moving across Europe and the U.S. And frankly, I could tell you when I looked at the 2016 election, at the time I was monitoring Russia's attack on U.S., when I traced it back, it began in 2008. Because Russia at the time saw that Americans elected the first Black president and saw that there was a part of the country that absolutely rejected it. They were burning effigies of Obama and they refused to acknowledge that he was the president. And as Russian current security services, as the KGB, they look for vulnerabilities in societies in order to exploit them and exacerbate them. And that's when they started the operation for 2016 election in 2008. Shortly after, they sent Russian advisors here. They started meeting with the Republican Party leaders. And from there, you see Putin come around 2011. Prigozhin's Troll Factory starts amplifying Oath Keepers and the 5%ers. You said 5%ers?
3%ers. It's not even 5, right?
3%ers by 2011 and 12. You see them amplifying Benghazi, the emails, and basically doing everything to lay the groundwork for the 2016 election. Unfortunately, we never took care of that, and here we are now because they continued, and by 2016, they literally got the biggest Kremlin asset as a mouthpiece in the world. Trump, who basically repeated every single one of their talking points and everything. I mean, he's like the dream of what KGB wasn't able to accomplish back in the decades by 2024. And here we are.
Can you talk about how the Russian intelligence services, the old KGB, the FSB, the operations around Prigozhin, who's now gone, but how they were able to get these ideas into the American political culture and, when successful, into the American mainstream? You mentioned Benghazi, and I mean, I can't think of a more successful operation than that. I'm talking about the disinfo operation that the Russians waged because it made it all the way into Congress, right? My mom was freaking out about Benghazi and Hillary's treachery and that kind of thing. And Americans were falling for a Russian disinfo campaign that made it all the way into Congress.
Yeah, no. So with the KGB, I mean, again, their main during the Cold War, and frankly, I mean, they've been at it since the 1920s. They've been, running espionage operations. And in the 1920s and 30s, it was more for stealing military secrets and technology. And then it shifted to active measures around the 1940s. But the KGB, this was their playbook. And I remember one point interviewing the head of the counterintelligence of KGB. He ran the counterintelligence in the 70s, Kalugin. And he told me at that point, I mean, they would be happy if they could run an anti-Semitic article in a local paper in U.S., even if 100 people read it. But with the advances in technology and social media, they are now able to inundate, and they put something out, they can spread it quickly to the point that billions are reading this in a minute. And with Russia, I mean, the way their information warfare, first of all, their information warfare operations are part of their military doctrine. It's always been like this. And the way their information warfare works, they don't spread one narrative. They spread 17 narratives. They will keep repeating them. They want to either confuse you to the point that you just check out and say, this is too complicated. I don't know what the truth is. Let me just, like it doesn't matter, and step away from it, like what they did with MH17 when they downed the plane over Ukraine, as they did with Crimea. I mean, anybody, with two brain cells understood that Russia invaded Crimea, but they spun such disinformation operations to the point that people were questioning, is there a civil war? Our own media to this day, still calls the Ukrainian separatists. They were never separatists. These were mercenaries and GRU, which are the military intelligence units, and FSB units who were running this operation. But they managed to confuse it so much that this is what people walked away with. Same thing with Syria. Assad killed over 750,000 Syrians, and they Russia's disinformation spun it as, a civil war. It's not a civil war. Assad was committing war crimes against his own citizens. So this is the point of Russia. So they have either they will pepper one message to the point, and with America, unfortunately, they were targeting MAGA. And during the 2010s through up to 2016 election and forward. And with them, they simplified it by using memes. In Ukraine, they use a different tactic because Ukrainians aren't susceptible to memes. So they will go into commentary of, online outlets and just write kind of very complicated comments that you can see are Kremlin talking points, but it wasn't outright visible. Whereas here, and they mocked this, they said, oh, these Americans are so stupid. The only thing they understand is pictures. So they targeted them with, the Benghazi pictures, the Hillary dying pictures, the Hillary looks like she's about to murder everyone pictures. And this is how they continued until 2016. And then with 2016, they had Trump to, carry out their message. And one last point I want to make on this, on the birtherism thing. This is another thing. This is part of the KGB playbook to cause a race war in U.S. The fact that Trump in, the early 2010s was pushing birtherism is the same thing. And Russia amplified that. And from there, I mean, their main tactics are just to get you on every social media platform. They have, the best tools to basically understand who you are as an individual, what your habits are online, how you operate online, what your vulnerabilities are. I honestly, people think I'm crazy, but you remember during over a decade ago, there were these Facebook polls, like your perfect first date, where would you want to go? And I think this was run by Russia because this captures what type of individual you are, where your weakness, are you sentimental, and they kind of capture these tools, exploit it, and that's it. And then they'll, either send directed messages, or they send a combination of directed and then completely opposing messages. We saw Russia countlessly, support, because the current Putin regime, unlike the Soviet Union with their communism, they don't have an ideology. So they will pose as Americans supporting transgender issues. At the same time, pose as Americans opposing transgender issues, and putting in, these things like this disinformation and this hate message. To the point, they just want that division. Same thing with Second Amendment rights. They will pose as, pro Second Amendment, against Second Amendment, online, and then they want to cause that major divide. And the last thing I'll say on this is that we've seen that over the past, I would say, few years, Russia's been trending to get this, disinformation and indoctrination offline into actual violence. We saw it with COVID, where they were not only spinning disinformation, but like terrorists indoctrinating people to suddenly take normal mothers who in their, maybe would complain about wearing a mask, and now they're so heated up that they're in front of their child's school burning masks. So they've been trending towards this violent trend for quite a while now. It started, I would say, around COVID, but actually a little bit before that, during George Floyd protests, and then COVID, and then you see, like, even in Brazil this happened, and you see it across the globe that they're trying to now take the people that they've indoctrinated and move them to actually commit violence.
Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then, Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, etc. So if you want to stay on track with your health this holiday season, go to lumen.me/Ken to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Ken for 15% off your purchase. Lumen makes a great gift too. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. It's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break here to let you know that we'd love to hear from you. Your comments, suggestions, thoughts about future topics and guests. Email us at info@thekenharbaughshow.com, and make sure to rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and back to the show. Why are we so ill-equipped to deal with this? And I'm not just talking about the legal regimes that we can employ to undermine disinformation or challenge it or get it off platforms. I'm talking about like the Western, or specifically the American mindset. You touch on this a little bit in some of your tweets, but there is something, I don't know, inherently naive about Americans when it comes to autocratic tactics. Why are we so vulnerable to this stuff?
Well, let's start with how Putin came into power. He, along with Patrushev, who was the head of FSB, blew up apartment buildings. What did the United States and Europe do? They welcomed him and tried to convince us that he was an anti-corruption leader, as he was removing people who weren't loyal to him to install his criminal thugs into these positions. So when you start off taking and whitewashing a KGB thug who blew up and killed 300 of Americans in order to get into power, and then try to push him through, as a normal anti-corruption. And look, this is a democratic Russia. I mean, this is a problem right there. Second of all, we patted ourselves on the back that we won the Cold War, whereas if you spoke to any Russian, they absolutely, even ones living in the United States. I mean, for them, this was the most biggest humiliation, to the point that, they, in their head, the Cold War never ended. They were out for revenge, and that's it. I mean, the only thing that needed to be done was to line the pieces as far as consolidating power inside. Russians for centuries have a very dark mentality. I mean, this goes back for so long, whether it's the Tsars, whether it was under Stalin, whether Lenin, they just have a dark outlook. They aim to be, they have this superiority with this victimization complex. And as a result, they are trained, to by all cost rise up to power. Whereas US and Europe, I mean, we are actually trying, to live our life, to create, be innovative, to have a good economy. We have a completely different mentality. And I think it's that mentality, along with the fact that, the United States and Europe, saw Putin as a legitimate leader when he came into power, continue doing deals with him. I mean, frankly, even if, they accepted him in 1999, 2000. In 2004, he used polonium on British soil to kill someone. I mean, you're using a chemical weapon to kill someone.
A
And we
nuclear
did
weapon.
nothing. Exactly. And we did nothing. And then by 2007, everything that we've been seeing here, they did in Estonia. Between the cyber attacks of taking out all their financial government infrastructure, between the disinformation operations, inciting local Russians by delivering them fake news over a Soviet statue that was moved out of town. I mean, Estonia was basically received the full, scale of this hybrid attack in 2007. We didn't do anything. 2008, Georgia got invaded. We didn't do anything. And with Russia, they keep upping the ante. This is just the mentality. I mean, this is a typical Russian mentality, whether it's dealing with government or a Russian person. If you don't push back, they're going to continue to see how much they could get, and they'll continue going forward. So I think up to 2016, we were naive. We also saw lucrative opportunities in Russia. I know Europe did. I mean, Merkel with her Nord Stream pipeline. Nord Stream, this just shows you how absurd the situation is. The Nord Stream pipeline, literally, well, Putin was a KGB officer stationed in Dresden, East Germany. He had, in the 1980s, recruited this guy, I believe his name is Warnick. The guy that he recruited in the 1980s was the CEO of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline company. So, I mean, you had Merkel at the time allowing a Stasi agent and a KGB agent, and the KGB agent who recruited the Stasi agent, to run an important pipeline. I mean, just shows you the absurdity. So there was a lot of money at stake. At the same time, there was the hope that Russia will become democratic, which frankly is a joke, because I'm still waiting for this democracy 500 years later. Um, and at the same time, by the time we realized what was happening, it was too late, because by 2016, Trump got into power. Until 2020, basically all agencies were hijacked under Trump, so they couldn't really investigate properly what happened. And if they did, they couldn't reveal properly what happened, because you had sabotage from Department of Justice and Barr. And then by the time Biden came into power in 21, you had, shortly after the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, and all resources shifted on helping Ukraine instead of and stopping Russia's sanctions evasions to build their military weapons instead of focusing on how to counter it. And this is the same thing with Europe. And now they're waking up. We temporarily lost America because of this. Europe, we see what's happening in Romania. Out of nowhere, TikTok a candidate now is running off who's a Russian, basically pro-Russian, Russian-owned candidate, suddenly came out of the blue and now is leading in the polls in Romania against, the pro-Western government. And where did he come from? TikTok. I mean, so we have a lot of work to do. I don't think U.S. right now will be capable of doing it, but at a minimum, Europe can. And it's a matter of one holding on to, one, understanding how Russia's operations work, understanding this is an actual war. Because unfortunately, people think this is online, so it's not a war. This is a war. When you indoctrinate a third of the country to believe everything that Russia is saying and to basically become traitors against your own country and work against your own country, this is a war, And like I say, if Russia would have thrown like a missile in New York, Americans will rally around each other, especially in 2016. Now they, celebrate that it's New York elites. But in 2016, they would have rallied around each other. Now, you see the divide in this country and you see this disinformation and this propaganda. It's like a silent killer. It's like a cancer that it keeps spreading.
How does our inability to appreciate the threats of these kinds of autocratic strategies implicate our response to an autocrat emerging in our own country? I'm going to refer to this tweet you just wrote. Actually, it was on Bluesky. We need to plug Bluesky because that's where we all need to be. You wrote,
Yes.
They are thinking from a Western viewpoint while Trump is preparing to unleash dictator tactics. Just like in Russia, he will attempt to fabricate info, evidence, and install loyalists in all agencies to serve his purpose. We have seen this story before, and unfortunately, we won't have guardrails this time. It feels like we're just not constitutionally equipped. And I mean constitutionally with like a small c. It's just not in our nature to have our guard up against autocrats in this country. And it exposes us to the kinds of excesses that in the past were limited by tradition and norms. And when you have a president like Trump who has no regard for tradition and norms and obliterates the actual legal guardrails, we don't know what to do.
Well, I mean, on one hand, America's lucky because they never had to live under a dictator. So that's the good thing. Um, a lot of the people who were sounding the alarm, including me in 2015 and 16, who saw these dictator tendencies, and at the time I was told I was being hyperbolic. This is just because we see it in our sleep. I mean, this is the type of system my parents fled from. So that's the one good thing. At the same time, because Americans never lived under a dictator, they don't understand what it means. And you have, people on both sides. You have the far left who's running, like, oh, we love Stalin. Oh, and, like pushing, again, Russian propaganda and hoping for kind of a dictatorship. And you have people on the right who are praising this dictatorship in 2021 after January 6th. I mean, they were praying for a military coup. One woman I remember in California, she was interviewed on CNN, and she's like, I hope that we have a military coup like in Myanmar. And meanwhile, that week, the military killed, blood cold shot them like 100-something protesters. It was a big massacre. So I think
In
people don't
Myanmar.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think people understand what it is that they want. So you have that part that a lot of people don't understand. Then you have the people who are the institutionalists, like the prosecutors and all the former Department of Justice people and military people. And they are trained to work by the rules. And they think that the Constitution will protect us and that the system will protect us. In 2016, it did. We had the likes of Kelly and Milley and, even, what was his name, Rex Tillerson and others who would not cross the line. So they held Trump back. Even, John Bolton, Trump wanted to leave NATO, and John Bolton's like, no, 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 that's not going to happen. Also in 2016, Trump didn't have the whole Republican Party captured. You still had pushback, through his first term. Now there is no guardrails left. And unfortunately, people keep saying, well, he can't do this. This is against the law. First of all, who is going to enforce this law? A captured Supreme Court or, a captured Department of Justice that instead of enforcing the law, they're going to be going after the likes of me and you to try to silence people who speak out against the regime, or the military. Who exactly is enforcing this law? America is built on a system of laws, but people really need to wake up that when a dictator does come into power, the only laws that are going to exist are the ones with the people. The people are going to have to, peacefully get together and push back against every single thing that Trump does. But I think it's just that combination. You have, people who expect America to function, which is me partly. I mean, in 2016 when Trump won, I mean, you had to see, on one hand, I knew he was going to win because of the effort I saw from Russia. On the other hand, I was like, where in the heck is our agencies and where's our law enforcement? How did this failure happen? I mean, someone like Trump laundered so much money for the Russian mafia and for even Russian intelligence officers through the 90s and 2000s, through his real estate properties that, he should have been indicted a long time ago for money laundering and for other crimes. Like, how could someone like him become a president? So I think it's that combination. But people are going to very quickly realize, and the first people are going to realize are the mega crowd, because we, for the most part, already understand and are coming to grips of what is coming. But the mega crowd, they're used to being extremely loud and vocal, and even to the point now with Trump's elections, they're carrying on. I don't like this. We're going to do this. And they're planning pushback against certain selections of his. When he's in power, this is not how it's going to work. They're not going to have a say in advising him what to do. So they're going to get their own lesson. By then, I mean, unfortunately, it's going to be late. We could have avoided all of this, but here we are.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think you're already seeing that with the zealous pro-life crowd who propelled him to the presidency the first time and again this time. And now that he has the power, he's ignoring them with, for example, nominating RFK, who I'm no fan of, but is a lifelong pro-choicer, and Trump couldn't care less about the people who actually installed him in the White House. If you need any more indicators that he's got these autocratic tendency, there's one more. Well, Olga, we're going to have to go ahead.
Wait, and I just want to add two things. One, the other nominee is Soros. I mean, Russia has spent decades poisoning the name of Soros and putting him behind every single, revolution and protest across the globe. And he puts in a guy who worked for Soros, who was one of the top Soros officials. And I'm like, how is Mega squaring this? So, they're going to have a lot, and Trump's going to have a lot of pressure. This is why I do say that, we could have avoided what is coming, the horror, but I do have hope, because not only does he have pressure to appease all the groups here, going right back to 1999, the former head of FSB, Patrushev, who assisted Putin in blowing up the buildings in order to put him into power, he recently, after the election, I believe it was last week, gave an interview to a Russian media outlet and basically said that unforeseen forces have helped Trump get into power, and then now, if he's a man of his word, that he's going to pay back his obligations within the next breath. Now, this is Russian intelligence. I would argue he's even more powerful than Putin inside of Russia, if not on the same level. In the same breath, he's issued another warning. I hope that, Secret Service can protect Trump and that he doesn't have another assassination attempt. Same interview. So basically, he's going to have to pay back Russia for whatever it is that they expect payment for. And then on top of it, appease all these different groups that he lied to. And they're all slowly going to come to grips that, he's not working for them.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there, Olga. I want to go back to your observation, though, that the American people have the ultimate power. And if we speak up and if we make our voices heard, and I think we have an opportunity to do that, maybe now more than ever, as those who are either on the fence or very shallow in their support for Trump see who he actually is, because it's going to be unavoidable over the next couple of years. I think there will be an historic backlash, and we need to marshal that energy to get our country back. Thanks, Olga. Great having you on.
Thank you.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.